This is a fictional story inspired by real life. The red dirt road stretched out under the scorching midday sun, cutting through the abandoned fields like an old scar that had never quite healed properly. John Sterling drove his white Ford F-250 truck covered in the fine dust characteristic of rural Oklahoma, with his eyes fixed on the undulating horizon that unfolded between hills and parched pastures. It was January in the year 2024, and the intense heat of that summer made the air tremble over the uneven asphalt, creating mirages that danced in the distance. At 57 years old, John carried on his face the marks of someone who had lived more than he would like to remember. Deep wrinkles surrounded his gray eyes. His skin was tanned by decades of working outdoors, and his gray hair was cut close to his head, complemented by a 3-day beard he never bothered to shave completely. His large, calloused hands held the steering wheel firmly, but there was a tension in his broad shoulders that betrayed the discomfort of that journey. It had been 4 years since John had returned to this region, 4 years since he had sold most of the land, got rid of the cattle, dismissed the few employees who still resisted, and left for the city, leaving behind Starlight Ranch. This was the property his family had cultivated for 3 generations, the place where he was born, grew up, married, and where he buried his dreams along with Claire, his wife. Claire, the name still hurt, like a wound that insisted on not closing. She had passed away 5 years ago, a victim of an aggressive illness that consumed her in less than 8 months. John still remembered every detail of those last days. The smell of the hospital mixed with the jasmine perfume she insisted on wearing, the weight of her thin hand in his, and the look that asked for forgiveness for leaving before the agreed time, after the funeral. John simply could not look at the farm the same way anymore. Every corner of the big house, every tree in the orchard, every curve of the creek that crossed the property whispered Claire's name. So he fled. He sold almost everything, keeping only the ownership papers of the main house and some surrounding land, and moved to Oklahoma City, where he rented a small apartment in a neighborhood without history, without memories, and without ghosts. He worked at an agricultural supplies company, lived a mechanical and solitary routine, avoided making deep friendships, and became the type of man people forgot 5 minutes after meeting. But life has a peculiar way of dragging people back to the places they try to forget. 3 weeks ago, John received a call from Anthony Marshall, the family lawyer, informing him of a surprisingly generous purchase proposal for the remaining lands of Starlight Ranch. An agribusiness company was expanding operations in the region and offered a value that John knew was at least 30% above the market. It was enough money to guarantee a comfortable retirement, maybe even buy a better house and start something new. However, Anthony Marshall had been clear. The buyers wanted to personally inspect the property before closing the deal and demanded that John be present to authorize access to all corners of the farm, including the main house that had been closed for years. It was a formality, they said, a matter of protocol. John tried to delegate the task, but the buyers were inflexible. They wanted the owner present. And so, after 4 years of avoiding that piece of ground, John found himself forced to return. As the truck advanced along the dusty road, John observed the transformations of the landscape. He recognized some neighboring properties, but much had changed. Where there were once small family farms, industrial soybean and corn plantations now rose, with irrigation pivots turning slowly over perfectly aligned hectares. Progress had reached that forgotten region of the interior, bringing wealth to some and displacement to others. He passed the entrance to the Carver farm, where a new, shiny sign announced Carver Agricultural Enterprises in place of the old hand-painted wooden board. Further on, old Mr. Crute, Jenkins' general store, which sold a bit of everything and served as a meeting point for farmers on Sundays, had been transformed into a modern gas station with a convenience store. When he finally caught sight of the entrance to Starlight Ranch, John felt his stomach tighten. The wrought iron gate that Claire had insisted on having made 15 years ago was covered in rust, and weeds grew around the masonry pillars. One of the gate leaves hung crookedly, with broken hinges. John parked the truck, got out, and pushed the gate with effort. The metal groaned and resisted, but finally gave way with a painful creak that scared away a flock of birds from the nearby trees. The private road that led to the main house was just over 2 kilometers long. John drove slowly, observing the state of neglect of everything around him. The fences were down in several sections, invaded by vines and thorny bushes. The pasture that once housed more than 200 head of cattle was now a sea of overgrown grass, punctuated by giant termite mounds that rose like monuments to forgetfulness. Passing by the curve of the creek, John saw that the wooden bridge he himself had built with his father 30 years ago had partially collapsed. He would have to look for another way to get to the house. Fortunately, he knew every meter of that land. He diverted through the old service trail that went around the hill on the east side. It was when he passed by the old barn that John noticed something strange. The barn, a wooden construction more than 60 years old that was already in poor condition when he left, seemed even more deteriorated now. The roof had collapsed on one side, and exposed beams pointed to the sky like broken ribs. The wide doors that once housed tractors and agricultural equipment hung from rusted hinges. But there was something out of place. One of the side doors, a smaller one, seemed to have been moved recently. John stopped the truck and observed carefully. Yes, there were definitely drag marks on the dirt floor in front of the barn, and another narrow, almost imperceptible trail cut through the tall grass toward the building. John got out of the truck and walked to the barn. His farmer's instinct, sharpened by decades of experience, perceived the details that others would ignore. There were recent footprints in the dry earth, small footprints of children, perhaps, and other larger ones of a woman, judging by the size and delicate shape of the sole. Intruders. The word formed in his mind with uncomfortable clarity. It was not uncommon for abandoned properties to attract homeless people, wanderers, or even criminals looking for a hiding place. John felt a pang of irritation, as if he didn't already have enough problems. Now he would have to deal with this as well. He approached the side door with caution. It was ajar, and through the crack escaped a characteristic smell, not of rot or total abandonment, but something more alive, the smell of wood smoke. Someone had made a fire in there, and recently John pushed the door slowly. It groaned, revealing the dark interior of the barn. Sunlight streamed through the cracks in the ruined roof, creating golden rays that cut through the gloom. Dust danced in these beams of light like reverse snow. John waited for his eyes to adjust to the darkness. The interior of the barn was a mess of debris, old rusted equipment, piles of rotting wood, and broken tools forgotten for years. But in a corner, clearly visible now, there were signs of human occupation. Some wooden crates arranged as improvised furniture, remains of an extinguished campfire in the center of a circle of stones, and old cloths spread over the straw, forming something that vaguely resembled beds. And then John heard a low, almost imperceptible sound. Breathing. Someone was there, hiding in the deepest shadows of the barn. "I know someone is in here," John said, his deep voice echoing in the confined space. "Better come out now. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk." Silence followed, with only the wind whistling through the loose boards. John advanced a few more steps, his eyes now completely adapted to the gloom. That was when he saw the movement. Behind a pile of old hay, a figure moved. Small, a child. "Hey, you don't need to be afraid." John softened his tone, although his heart beat fast. "I just want to know what you're doing here. This is my property." Another movement, and then slowly a girl emerged from the shadows. She must have been about 7 or 8 years old, far too thin, with disheveled brown hair falling over her dirty face. her huge, dark eyes fixed on John with a mixture of fear and defiance that he recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who had already suffered enough to know that the world does not forgive weakness. The girl's clothes were a collection of poorly sewn rags, an old t-shirt too large with holes in the sides, and a skirt that must have belonged to someone else, tied at the waist with a piece of rope. Her feet were bare and dirty with recent scratches. "Hi," John said, not quite knowing what to do. He never had children. Claire and he had tried for years, but life had not granted them that grace. "What is your name?" The girl didn't answer, just kept looking at him, motionless like a cornered animal. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." John knelt down, trying to seem less threatening. "My name is John. This farm is mine. Are you here alone?" Before the girl could answer, if she even would, John heard another sound. Fast footsteps coming from outside the barn. He turned in time to see a figure entering through the side door, moving with desperate urgency. It was a woman, maybe in her early 30s, although it was hard to tell for sure. Exhaustion and deprivation age people in cruel ways. She was tall and slender, with long black hair tied in a messy ponytail. Her face, which in other circumstances might have been beautiful, was too thin, with prominent cheekbones and deep dark circles under her eyes. She wore worn-out jeans and a faded blouse that was once white. But what caught John's attention was the expression on her face. Absolute terror and fierce protection. She ran to the girl, placing herself between her and John in a fluid movement, her arms open like a shield. In the woman's arms, John noticed there was another movement. A smaller child. A boy. He couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, clinging to the woman's neck, his eyes wide with fright. "Please," the woman's voice came out raspy, as if she hadn't used it in a long time, or as if she had spent too much time screaming. "Please, don't call the police. I beg you." "We'll leave. Just give us until tomorrow, please. We didn't break anything. We didn't steal anything. I swear." John remained kneeling, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He observed the scene before him. The skeletal woman trembling with fear and malnutrition, the girl clutching her leg, the small boy hiding his face in her neck. A desperate, hungry family hiding. Something inside him, something that had been dormant for a long time, began to wake up. A strange, uncomfortable feeling. Compassion, perhaps. Or the memory of when he himself was a child and went hungry during the difficult years of the drought, when his father lost harvest after harvest, and the family survived on cassava and watered-down beans. "How long have you been here?" John asked, keeping his voice low and calm. The woman hesitated, her eyes moving quickly between John and the possible escape routes, calculating, measuring. 2 weeks, she said finally. Maybe 3. I lost track of the days. John looked around the barn again, now with different eyes. He saw the details he had previously ignored. An old tin being used to store water, food scraps, peels of wild fruits possibly gathered from the abandoned trees on the property, and a pile of carefully organized firewood. They were trying to survive on almost nothing. "Where did you come from?" John asked. "Does it matter?" The woman's response came quickly and defensively. "I know we're trespassing. I know we have no right to be here. We just needed a place. Just for a while. Until I can put something together, some money to move on." "Are you running from someone?" John asked the question that his life experience had already answered. A woman alone, with 2 children hidden in an abandoned barn, terrified of being discovered. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. The silence that followed was answer enough. The woman lowered her eyes, clutching the children against her. The small boy began to whimper softly. John got up slowly, brushing the dust off his pants. The woman took a step back, protective. prepared to run if necessary. He saw this and stopped, maintaining his distance. "Have you eaten today?" The question clearly caught her by surprise. She blinked, confused. "What?" "Food. Have you eaten anything today?" The woman looked at the children, then back at John, her eyes filled with tears that she fiercely fought to suppress. "The children ate some wild peaches. I found a tree near here. They weren't very good, but... And you?" "I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine. I asked if you ate." Silence again. The answer was clear on her thin face, in the bones protruding under her pale skin. John ran his hand over his face, feeling his rough beard, trying to process the situation. He had come there to resolve property sale issues, to deal with ghosts of the past, to close a chapter of his life. He didn't expect to find an entire, desperate family hiding on his abandoned land. The logical decision, the decision any sensible person would take, would be clear. Call the authorities, let social services deal with the situation, wash his hands of it, and follow through with the sale plans. It wasn't his problem. He had his own wounds to tend to, his own weight to carry. But as he looked at that woman and those children, John felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a pang of something dangerously like responsibility, like purpose. "The main house is 2 kilometers from here," he said finally. "It's been abandoned for 4 years, but the structure is solid. It has a wood stove, a water well, even electricity if we can get it back on. There must be canned food in the cupboard still, things I left behind." The woman looked at him suspiciously, not understanding where he was going with this. "Why are you telling me this?" John walked to the barn door and stopped, looking at the sunlight outside. He thought of Claire, of what she would say if she were there. She was always the soft-hearted one, the one who fed stray dogs, the one who donated blankets to the homeless in the city. She would have helped, without thinking twice. "Because nobody should live in a falling-down barn," John said, still with his back turned. "Especially not children. Get your things. I'm going to take you to the house." "Wait!" The woman's voice was loaded with incredulity and suspicion. "Why? Why would you do this? You don't know me." "You don't know anything about me, about where we came from, what we're fleeing." John turned to face her. His gray eyes met hers, dark and frightened. "No, I don't know," he admitted. "And maybe it's better that way for now. But I know what I see. I see a woman trying to protect 2 children. I see people going hungry on land that is mine, land that has been empty for years. I see," he hesitated, looking for the right words. "I see a chance to do something that isn't turning my back." The woman remained motionless for a long moment, studying John's face, looking for signs of lies, of danger, of a trap. Her experiences had clearly taught her not to trust easily. But hunger and despair are powerful persuaders. "And then?" she asked, in a low voice. "After we're in the house, are you going to call someone? Police? Child Protective Services?" "Then we'll see," John said. "First, let's get these children out of here and give them decent food. The rest can wait." The girl pulled on the woman's blouse and whispered something John couldn't hear. The woman looked down at her daughter's supplicating face, and something in her expression broke. The armor of distrust cracked, letting out a glimpse of desperate hope. "All right," she said finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. "All right, we'll go." John's truck advanced along the private road toward the main house, and for the first time in 4 years, the journey felt different. Not just a trip back to a painful past, but something more. Something indefinable. In the back seat, the woman sat rigidly, the little boy in her lap, the girl squeezed against her side. John could feel the tension emanating from them like palpable heat. Trust isn't earned in minutes, he knew. Especially not when you've fled from situations bad enough to live hidden in abandoned barns. "What is your name?" John asked, breaking the tense silence. There was a pause then. "Isabel." "Isabel. That's a beautiful name." John kept his eyes on the road. "And the children?" "She is Lily. He is Leo." Isabel pulled the children a little closer, still protective. "They are my children." John nodded. He didn't ask more questions. Not yet. There would be time for conversations and explanations later. Now, the important thing was to get to the house. When they finally turned the last curve and the main house of Starlight Ranch appeared in view, John felt a familiar tightening in his chest. The two-story construction, painted white with blue windows, had been his family's home for 3 generations. Now, overgrown with weeds, with shutters hanging loose and a roof covered in dry leaves, it looked like a ghost version of itself. But it was still standing, solid, waiting. John parked the truck in front of the wide porch that surrounded the front of the house. He got out and opened the back door for Isabel and the children. They stepped out slowly, looking around with a mixture of admiration and fear. "It's big," Lily said, her eyes running over the facade of the house. "It was," John corrected. "Now it's just old and forgotten. But the bones are good. Let's go in." He climbed the porch steps, noting that several boards were loose and would need repair. The front door was locked with an old padlock that John opened with the key he carried on his keychain. He never had the heart to throw those keys away, even knowing he would probably never return. The door groaned as it opened, revealing the dark interior of the house. A smell of mold and closed time filled the air. John went in first, fumbling for the light switch on the wall. It didn't work, of course. The power had been cut for years. But the sunlight coming through the dusty windows was enough to see. The living room was exactly as he had left it. Furniture covered by white sheets that were now gray with dust, and portraits on the walls, family photos that John hadn't looked at in an eternity. The wide wooden floorboards creaked under his feet. Isabel followed behind him, holding the children's hands. Her eyes took in everything. The old furniture, the chandeliers covered in cobwebs, the faded curtains. To John, it was abandonment and decay. To her, John realized, it probably looked like a palace. "The kitchen is this way," John said, walking down the side hallway. "Let's see what's in the cupboards." The farm kitchen was large and functional, built in a time when one cooked for large families and workers. It had a huge cast-iron wood stove, a deep sink with a manual water pump, and solid wood cabinets covering 2 entire walls. John began to open the cabinets one by one. Dust and cobwebs fell. But there, stored on the back shelves, he found what he was looking for. Cans that were rusty but still sealed. Beans, corn, sardines, canned guava, yellowed sugar in glass jars, coarse salt, and rice in cloth bags that would probably have to be sifted but were still usable. "There's food," Isabel whispered behind him, her voice choked. "There's so much food!" John turned and saw tears streaming down her face, not tears of sadness, but of relief, of hope. He felt a lump in his throat and quickly turned his attention back to the cabinets. "I'll light the stove," he said. "The chimney must be clogged with bird nests, but we'll find a way. There's firewood piled in the backyard if it hasn't all rotted. Do you want beans and rice? There are sardines to go with it." "I can cook," Isabel offered quickly. "I know how to cook. Let me do it, please. I want to help." John looked at her, at that thin and exhausted woman who, even after everything she had clearly been through, still wanted to maintain some dignity, some sense of utility. He understood. He understood perfectly. "Okay," he agreed. "But first, let's clean this stove and get some wood. Lily and Leo, do you want to help me get wood?" The children looked at their mother, who hesitated before nodding with a small smile. It was another act of trust, small but significant. For the next 40 minutes, John worked. He cleaned the stove's chimney, piled wood in the firebox, and taught Leo how to make paper balls to start the fire while Lily organized the small twigs. Isabel cleaned an old pot they found, sifted the rice, and opened the cans with a rusty opener. When the fire finally caught in the stove and the smell of wood smoke began to fill the kitchen, something changed in the air. It was a familiar smell of home, of life being lived. John didn't realize he had missed it until that moment. Isabel cooked in silence, her movements efficient and precise. She clearly knew what she was doing. John pulled old wooden chairs to the kitchen table, wiped the dust with a damp cloth, and organized old porcelain plates with blue flowers hand-painted on them that had belonged to John's grandmother. When the food was ready, simple beans, white rice, and open-canned sardines, it felt like a luxury compared to what that family had eaten in recent weeks. They sat down together. John hadn't said a blessing before eating since Claire died, but when he saw Isabel close her eyes and murmur a low prayer with the children, he waited respectfully. Then they ate. John watched as Leo and Lily devoured the food with a hunger that hurt to see. Their small hands filled their spoons repeatedly, their mouths chewing too fast, as if they feared the food would disappear. Isabel ate more slowly, but John noticed how she constantly served more to the children before serving herself. "Eat slowly," John advised, gently. "The food isn't going to run out. There's more. You can have as much as you want." Lily looked at him with wide eyes, as if he had promised the moon. For real? For real. They had second helpings, and in Leo's case, third helpings. When they finally stopped, their little bellies visibly bulging under their torn clothes, their faces displayed a satisfaction John hadn't seen in children for a long time. Pure and simple contentment. Isabel wiped Leo's mouth with the hem of her own blouse and looked at John. "Thank you," she said, and for the first time since they met, her voice sounded truly warm. I don't know what to say, besides thank you. You didn't have to do this." "No," John agreed, "but I did. And now that it's done, we need to talk about what comes next." Tension immediately returned to Isabel's face. She straightened her shoulders, preparing for whatever might come next. "I understand," she said. "You were generous. More than fair. We ate, we're rested. We can leave now if you want. I won't create trouble. Just maybe we could wait until dawn?" "Traveling at night with the children is dangerous." John shook his head. "It's not about you leaving. Then what is it?" "It's about staying." Isabel blinked, clearly not understanding. "Stay here in the house?" "For now." John leaned back in the chair, his fingers drumming on the wooden table. "Look, I'm not a fool. I know you're running from something or someone. I'm not going to force you to tell me if you're not ready. But I also can't just throw you and these children on the road without knowing if you have anywhere to go. We'll find a way. We always have. I'm sure you would. But it doesn't have to be like that. This house is empty. There are spare rooms upstairs. There's well water. There's wood for cooking. There's food in the cabinets to last at least a few weeks, if we ration it right. But why?" Isabel's voice rose a tone, a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Why would you do this? Nobody does this. Nobody helps for free." John was silent for a moment, considering the question. Why was he really doing this? Kindness? Loneliness? Guilt? The memory of Claire, perhaps? Everything together, mixed in an impossible way to separate. "Because I can," he said finally, "and because this house has been empty for too long. If it can serve to provide shelter for someone who needs it, then let it serve." "And for how long?" Isabel asked in a low voice. "How long can we stay? That's complicated." John sighed. "I came here to sell the property. There are interested buyers. They're coming to do an inspection. That gives you maybe a week, 2 at most, to figure out what to do next. Where to go, how to manage. It's not much, I know, but it's more than we had yesterday, Isabel interrupted. Much more. The children, exhausted after their first decent meal in weeks, began to doze off in the chairs. Lily fought to keep her eyes open, her head drooping. Leo had already completely surrendered, sleeping with his cheek resting on the table. "Let me show you the rooms," John said, getting up. "You need to really rest in real beds." He picked up Leo in his arms. The boy was far too light, almost nothing in John's arms, and guided Isabel and Lily upstairs. The upper floor had 5 rooms, each with furniture covered by dusty sheets. John chose what used to be the guest room, far enough from the room he and Claire had shared. "There are 2 beds here," he said, pulling off the old sheets and revealing double beds with mattresses that, although old, were still firm. "It's not luxury, but it's better than the barn floor." "It's perfect," Isabel murmured, looking around the room with an expression of someone who couldn't believe her own luck. John laid Leo down on one of the beds. The boy didn't even move, deeply asleep. Lily climbed into the other bed on her own and curled up in a fetal position, her eyes already closed. "There are blankets in the closet there," John indicated, "and a bathroom at the end of the hallway. The shower water is cold because there's no power to heat it, but it works. There's also a basin and bucket if you want to wash up today." "Thank you," Isabel said again, the word beginning to sound insufficient for all she was feeling. "Seriously, thank you." John nodded and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. In the hallway, he stopped for a moment, leaning against the wall, trying to process the bizarre day he was having. He had come here to close a chapter, to sell the ranch, and move on. Instead, he had found a desperate family and somehow had become responsible for them, at least temporarily. It was the opposite of everything he had planned. And yet, as he walked back downstairs to the kitchen, John felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly, but perhaps purpose, utility. The feeling that his presence in the world made a difference, even if small, for someone. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. John went out to the porch, sat on the creaking wooden steps, and looked at the land that had belonged to his family for so many years. The land he had tried to abandon, but which had pulled him back. And now, this same land sheltered secrets. A woman fleeing an unknown past. Children who knew hunger better than they should, and him, John Sterling, a bitter widower who thought he had left behind any capacity to care. He didn't know yet what decision he had really made that afternoon, whether he was postponing the inevitable or changing the course of his own destiny. But as the sun disappeared over the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the increasingly dark sky, John made a decision. He wouldn't sell the ranch. Not yet. Not until he understood what was happening. Not until he was sure that Isabel and the children would be safe, and if that meant facing the past he had tried to forget, facing memories of Claire in every corner of that house, then so be it. Some things, John was beginning to realize, are worth the pain of remembering. Morning arrived at Starlight Ranch, with the crowing of roosters that still lived wild around the property. John woke up on the living room sofa where he had spent the night. He couldn't bring himself to go upstairs. He couldn't enter any of the rooms loaded with memory. The old sofa, covered by a sheet he found in a closet, served well enough. He got up with his back aching, remembering that he was no longer at an age to sleep on sofas. It was almost 6 o'clock in the morning, and the weak light of dawn entered through the dusty windows, creating golden patterns on the wooden floor. The house was silent. No sound came from the upper floor. John prepared coffee in the kitchen using the old cloth strainer he found hanging on a nail. The coffee was old, From the stocks he had left years ago, but it still served its purpose. The familiar smell filled the kitchen, and John allowed himself a moment of nostalgia. Claire always woke up to the smell of coffee. She said it was the best alarm clock in the world. He was finishing the second cup when he heard light footsteps on the stairs. Isabel came down, still wearing the same worn-out clothes from the previous day, her hair tied in a loose bun. She stopped upon seeing John, seeming momentarily surprised to find him still there. "Good morning," John said. "There's coffee if you want." "Good morning," she replied, her voice still raspy from sleep. "I thought you might have left." "And leave you here alone?" John poured coffee into another old mug he had found. "I don't have much to do if you're going to stay here for a few days." Isabel accepted the coffee with both hands, as if she were receiving something precious. She took a sip and closed her eyes, savoring it. "It's been a long time since I've had real coffee." They were silent for a few minutes, just drinking coffee in the kitchen illuminated by the morning light. It was Isabel who finally broke the silence. "The children are still sleeping. I think it's been a long time since they've slept in a real bed." "Let them rest then," John said. "In the meantime, I wanted to talk to you without the children around." Tension immediately returned to Isabel's shoulders. She put the mug on the table, preparing herself. "About what?" "About what you're running from." "I didn't say I was running. You didn't have to." John sat at the table, indicating the chair in front of him for Isabel. "A woman alone, with 2 children hiding in an abandoned barn, jumping at any noise. I don't need to be a detective to put the pieces together." Isabel remained standing for another moment before finally sitting down. Her fingers played nervously with the handle of the mug. "If I tell you, will you change your mind about letting us stay?" "It depends on what you tell me," John was honest. "If you tell me you escaped from prison or did something that puts my land at risk, then yes, I'll have to rethink. But if it's a matter of a bad relationship, of domestic violence, that kind of thing, no, I won't change my mind." Isabel studied his face for a long time, looking for signs of lies or judgment. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she sighed deeply and began to speak. "The father of the children is named Richard. We met 10 years ago when I was working at a diner in Oklahoma City. He was charming, funny, attentive, at least at first." She paused, taking another sip of coffee before continuing. "We got married fast. Too fast. Lily was born in the first year, then Leo came 3 years later. And between those years, things changed. Richard started drinking more, lost his job at the refinery, started getting involved with the wrong people, doing odd jobs for some people I'd rather not know." John listened in silence, recognizing a familiar pattern. Stories like this weren't rare in the interior, he knew. Good men who got lost, families that fell apart. "Did he hit you?" John asked, directly. Isabel nodded, her eyes fixed on the mug. "It started with pushing, then slapping, then worse. I endured it because I didn't know where to go. My parents died when I was a teenager. I have no siblings. I had no money saved. And Richard always said it would get better, that he would stop drinking, that he would go back to how he was before. But he never did. They never do they?" She gave a bitter laugh. "It just kept getting worse. And then, about 6 months ago, he got into heavy debt. Drug money, I think. Or gambling. He never told me exactly. But the guy started showing up at the house, collecting, threatening, and Richard, he started talking about giving Lily away." Isabel's voice broke on the last word. John felt a cold anger grow in his chest. Selling her to pay the debt? There's a man in the city who takes children for illegal adoption or worse. Richard said Lily was pretty, that she would bring good money. The tears finally flowed down Isabel's face. "I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't." "Of course not," John said firmly. "So I waited for him to go out one night, took the children, and left the house. I took only the clothes on my back and some change I had hidden. I took the bus as far as the money went, and then we walked. sleeping where we could, eating when we found something, always hiding because I knew Richard would look. He wouldn't let us go easily. And did he look? At first, yes. I saw some flyers with my photo in Tulsa saying I had kidnapped the children, that I was wanted. But that was over a month ago. I think he gave up or found another way to pay the debt. John digested the information in silence. The story was bad, but not as bad as it could be. At least Isabel wasn't a criminal. She was just a desperate mother protecting her children. Did you file a police report? Is there anything documented about the abuse? Isabel shook her head. I was afraid. Richard knew people in the police in the city. He said if I reported him, they wouldn't believe me, and that when I left the station, he would make me pay. What about the children? Birth certificates? Documents? Everything was left at the house. I didn't have time to take them. John ran his hand over his face, thinking. The situation was complicated, but not impossible. He knew people who could help, lawyers, social workers. But all that would take time. Isabel and the children needed stability now. All right, John said finally. Here is what we're going to do. You and the children stay here for now. I'm not going to tell anyone about you yet, but eventually, we're going to have to regularize the situation, get new documents, maybe file for divorce and custody. I have no money for a lawyer, Isabel said quickly. I didn't ask for money. I said, we'll resolve it. But first, let's take care of the basics. You need clean clothes, decent food, and the children probably need to see a doctor. Isabel looked at him with an expression of incredulity and gratitude mixed together. Why are you doing this? She asked again. The same question from the night before, but now with more weight, more need to understand. John took a while to answer. He looked out the kitchen window at the abandoned orchard outside, where the fruit trees grew wild, without pruning, without care. My wife Claire, she always said, we only truly own what we share, he said slowly. Land, food, house, none of it is worth anything if we keep it just for ourselves. I forgot that when she died. I forgot a lot of things. But looking at you and your children, I think I'm remembering. Before Isabel could answer, they heard light footsteps coming down the stairs. Lily appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing her eyes, her messy hair forming a brown cloud around her face. Good morning, the girl said shyly. Good morning, Lily, John replied. Did you sleep well? The girl nodded energetically. It was the best bed in the whole world. Leo is still sleeping. He snores a lot. John smiled. It was a small, rusty smile, having been used so little, but it was genuine. How about breakfast, then? I think there are some cookies in the tins, and I can make fried eggs if you want. Lily's eyes lit up. Real chicken eggs? Well, I'll have to go out there and hunt for the eggs because the chickens here have been wild for years. But yes, real eggs. John stood up. Want to come with me to find the eggs? Lily looked at her mother, who nodded with a small smile. Go on, sweetie. Just be careful. The excitement on the girl's face as she followed John out of the house was a beautiful thing to see. It had been a long time since John had seen a child get excited about simple things like that. The free-range chickens on the farm had become practically wild in the 4 years of abandonment, making nests in unusual places all over the yard. John and Lily spent the morning hunting for eggs under bushes, inside the old barn, even in an old abandoned wagon near the corral. Lily screamed with joy every time she found an egg, holding it as if it were a precious treasure. I found another one, she exclaimed, running to John with a spotted brown egg in her hands. It's warm. That's because the hen just laid it, John explained. Want to learn how to know if an egg is fresh? Lily nodded enthusiastically, and John spent the following minutes teaching the girl the tricks he had learned from his father decades ago, how to check the freshness of an egg by the shell, by the weight, and by the sound near her ear. When they returned to the kitchen with a dozen eggs in an old basket, they found Leo awake, sitting in Isabel's lap, still sleepy but with curious eyes observing everything around him. Look, Leo. Lily ran to her brother. We found eggs! A lot of eggs. The boy smiled. A small, shy smile, but it was there. John prepared breakfast fried eggs, old cookies that were miraculously still edible, and coffee with milk for the children. They ate together at the kitchen table, and for the first time, John noticed how different it was to have life in that house again. The voices of the children, the sound of cutlery hitting plates, even the occasional cry from Leo when he spilled milk on his shirt, all of it brought a vivacity that the house hadn't known in years. After breakfast, John announced his plans for the day. "I need to go to town to get some things. Fresh food, clean clothes for you, maybe some toys for the children if I find any in the store." "You don't need to buy anything for us," Isabel protested quickly. "You've already done too much." "It's not a question of needing," John countered. "It's a question of you being in need." "What size are the children for clothes?" Isabel hesitated before giving the information. John noted everything on a piece of old paper. "I'll be about 3 hours," he said. "The nearest town is 40 minutes from here. Will you be okay alone?" "We always were," Isabel said, but there was a touch of nervousness in her voice. John understood. She didn't fully trust him yet. She still feared he would go away and not come back, or worse, that he would bring authorities with him. "I'll be back," John said, looking directly into her eyes. "I promise, and I won't tell anyone about you." "Not yet." And with that, he left. The town of Red Creek had only 1,500 inhabitants, and a main street where all the commerce was concentrated. John parked the truck in front of the local grocery store, the largest in town, and went in with his mental list of what he needed to buy. He filled the cart with basics: rice, beans, oil, salt, sugar, pasta, various canned goods. He added fresh fruits, bananas, oranges, apples, milk, bread, butter, cleaning products, soaps, shampoo. In the clothing section, he chose simple but practical pieces for Isabel and the children: jeans, t-shirts, a simple cotton dress for Lily that she would probably like, shorts for Leo, underwear, flip-flops. At the checkout, the clerk, a middle-aged woman with dyed blonde hair and many noisy bracelets, looked at the purchases with ill-disguised curiosity. "My, Mr. Sterling, it's been a long time since I've seen you around here. All these groceries. Do you have visitors?" John Sterling was known in the region even though he had left years ago. People remembered him. They remembered the Sterling family, owners of Starlight Ranch for 3 generations. "Yes," John replied briefly, not elaborating. "Ah, that's good." The ranch was so abandoned, wasn't it? It was a shame. "But it's good that it's coming back to life there." She began to scan the products, her tongue loose, not stopping. "You know, they said they saw smoke coming from the chimney of your house yesterday. Mrs. Gable mentioned it at church on Sunday. I said, it must be John who came back." John just nodded, paying for the groceries and leaving before more questions were asked. But he knew how small towns worked. The news of his return and the smoke in the house must already be spreading. It was only a matter of time before they started asking more direct questions. He made one more stop at the pharmacy, buying basic medicines, children's vitamins, and bandages. Then at the utility store, where he bought some new blankets, extra plates and cutlery, and pans that were missing. When he returned to the truck loaded with bags, he found someone waiting for him. A tall, burly man wearing jeans, a plaid shirt, worn leather boots, and a leather hat. "John Sterling," the man greeted, extending his hand. "I didn't expect to see you around these parts again." John recognized the man immediately. Will Carver, owner of the neighboring ranch, one of the largest landholders in the region, and not exactly a friend. "Will," John shook his hand briefly. "Yes, I came back to resolve some property matters." "I heard you're going to sell to that agribusiness group." Will was direct, as always. "Good decision. Standing land is good for nothing anyway. They're offering a good price?" "Reasonable," John said, not wanting to go into details. If you change your mind, I'll make an offer too. Will pulled a card from his pocket and offered it to John. I've always been interested in Starlight Ranch. Good terrain, good water. It fits perfectly right next to my property. John accepted the card more out of politeness than real interest. I'll think about it. And all this shopping? Will gestured to the bags in the truck, planning to stay for a while. Just resolving things, John repeated vaguely. Will studied him for a moment, his small, calculating eyes analyzing. Right. Well, if you need anything, just let me know. We're neighbors, after all. Neighbors. The words sounded strange to John. Will had never been exactly friendly in the past. In fact, there were times when they disputed ownership of a spring that was on the boundary of the properties. The dispute was settled in court in John's favor, but it left bitterness between the families. John said goodbye and left. But in the rearview mirror, he saw Will still standing there, watching the truck pull away. When John returned to the ranch, carrying bags and more bags, he was received by Lily, who ran to him screaming with joy. "You came back! You really came back!" The genuine joy of the girl caught John off guard. When was the last time someone was happy to see him arrive? He couldn't remember. "Of course I came back," he said, unloading the bags. "I said I would." Isabel appeared on the porch, holding Leo by the hand. Her face showed clear relief, although she tried to hide it. "I brought some things," John announced. "Food, clothes, that kind of stuff. Let's take it all inside." In the following hours, the house gained even more life. Isabel organized the groceries in the cupboards, making a mental list of possible meals. The children tried on the new clothes. Lily spun in the simple cotton dress as if she were a princess. Leo laughed as Isabel struggled to put the new flip-flops on his feet. "Is there soap?" Isabel whispered, holding a bar of soap as if it were gold. "Real soap. It's been so long." "There's a shower working too," John reminded. "The water is cold, but it's clean if you want to wash up." He didn't need to offer twice. Isabel took the children to the upstairs bathroom, and John heard from below the laughter of Lily and Leo as they took a bath. The sound of happy children in his house was so strange, so new, and yet so comforting. While he waited, John began to work on the house. He fixed a broken window in the living room, cleaned the dust off the furniture, swept the floor. They were simple, mechanical tasks, but there was something therapeutic about them. With every piece of furniture cleaned, every small repair made, John felt as if he were also cleaning a bit of the dust that covered his own soul. When Isabel came down again an hour later, she was transformed. Her hair was washed and combed, her skin clean, wearing one of the simple clothes John had bought, jeans and a white blouse. She looked 10 years younger, healthier, almost beautiful, John thought, before quickly dismissing the thought. "The children fell asleep," she said. "I think the bath made them tired." "Good." John returned his attention to the window he was fixing. "Let them rest." Isabel approached, observing John's work. "You fix things?" "I grew up doing this." John fitted the new glass into the frame. "A ranch doesn't maintain itself. I learned early that if it breaks, you fix it." We didn't have money to keep calling people all the time. "I can help," Isabel offered quickly. "I don't know much about fixing, but I can clean, cook, anything. I don't want to stay still while you work." John stopped and looked at her. He saw the pride in her eyes, the need to be useful, not to be just a burden. "Okay," he agreed. "The kitchen needs a deep cleaning, and there's bed linen in the cupboards upstairs that needs to be washed. You can start there if you want." For the following days, they established a routine. John spent the mornings fixing things around the farm. Broken fences, rusted hinges, loose tiles. Isabel cleaned the house, cooked increasingly better meals as she gained confidence in the kitchen and access to more ingredients. The children explored the surroundings of the house, always under supervision, discovering a world they had never known, trees to climb, creeks to play in, wild animals to observe. It was almost peaceful, almost like a normal family living a normal life. But John knew it was temporary. The buyers would come soon to do the inspection. He would have to make a decision about the sale and, more importantly, he would have to decide what to do with Isabel and the children in the long term. On the 5th night since they met, after the children fell asleep, John and Isabel sat on the front porch, drinking coffee and observing the starry sky. It was a clear night, without a moon, and the stars shone intensely as they only shine far from the city lights. "I heard today that the neighbors are talking," John said, breaking the comfortable silence. "That there's smoke in the house, that there are people living here." Isabel became tense immediately. "Are they going to ask questions?" "They already are," John admitted. "Not many yet, but they will increase. Small-town life is like that. Everyone wants to know everyone's business." "We can leave," Isabel said quickly. "If this is causing trouble for you, we'll go. You've already done too much." "No," John interrupted. "It's not about you leaving. It's about us having a story that makes sense when they start asking more. A story? A lie, if you want to be direct." John took a sip of the coffee. "We can say that you're a relative of mine. A distant cousin, maybe, who was widowed, and I offered shelter for a while. It's a simple, believable story, and it doesn't raise much suspicion." Isabel considered that. "And if someone checks, if they ask questions, nobody will check. Not here. There's nobody who knows me well enough to know all the branches of my family." John leaned back in the wooden chair. "My father had siblings scattered all over the state. It's perfectly plausible that I have cousins I never met." "You thought about all this?" "I did," John admitted. "Because if you're going to stay here, even if temporarily, it needs to make sense. It needs to be sustainable. And you want us to stay?" The question hung in the air between them. John took a while to answer, looking at the stars as if they could give him the right answer. "I don't know if it's about what I want," he said finally. "It's about what's right. You have nowhere to go. I have this empty house. It makes sense, at least for now. But what about the sale? I'm thinking of postponing it." Isabel looked at him, surprised. "Because of us?" "Not only that," John shook his head. "Also, because. Because coming back here made me realize some things about leaving this place. About fleeing memories. Claire wouldn't want me to sell the family land just because it hurts to remember her." "Your wife," Isabel said softly. "You don't talk much about her. There's not much to talk about. She died. I stayed. I tried to forget everything and start over. It didn't work. I'm sorry. I am too." John finished his coffee and stood up. But sitting and feeling sorry doesn't help anything. You have to move forward somehow. Claire always said that. She said that sadness that doesn't turn into action is just a waste of time. He went into the house, leaving Isabel alone on the porch. She stayed there for a few more minutes looking at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened in the last few days. From sleeping in a barn with hunger and fear, to having a roof, food, and something that was starting to look distantly like security. But Isabel knew better than anyone that security is a fragile illusion that can be broken at any moment. That people can change their minds, circumstances can turn, and pasts can catch up. And as she looked into the darkness beyond the farm, Isabel couldn't completely push away the fear that somewhere out there, Richard was still looking, still wanting to recover what he considered his, including her and the children. The second week at Starlight Ranch brought a routine that John didn't know he was missing. He woke up with the sun, prepared coffee, and found Isabel already in the kitchen, starting the breakfast preparation. The children came down noisy and cheerful, bringing energy that the house hadn't known in years. John had postponed the buyers for 2 weeks, using the excuse that he needed to make some repairs to the property before the inspection. It wasn't a complete lie. He was indeed repairing things, just not with the objective of selling. Every fence fixed, every tile replaced, every door adjusted brought back a piece of the ranch that he had thought he had lost forever. Isabel proved to be more than a grateful guest. She worked tirelessly cleaning, cooking, and tending to the abandoned vegetable garden that was starting to revive under her care. She had a hand for gardening, John noticed. The plants responded to her in an almost magical way. In just 10 days she had pulled the weeds, prepared the soil, and planted seeds that John had bought in town. "My grandmother had a garden," Isabel explained one morning while digging the earth under the hot sun. "She taught me. She said that planting is an act of faith. You bury the seed without a guarantee that it will sprout, but you take care of it anyway." John, who was fixing the fence around the backyard, stopped to observe her. There was something different about Isabel in the last few days. The constant tension she carried in her shoulders had diminished. She smiled more, laughed at the children's antics, and hummed while cooking. But John knew enough about pain to know that it was only dormant, not healed yet. She still woke up in the middle of the night. He heard her steps in the hallway, the creaking of the floorboards upstairs while she checked on the children. Perhaps she looked through the window, looking for threats that weren't there. It was on a Tuesday afternoon when John was returning from town with more supplies that things started to complicate. He was passing through the main square of Red Creek when he saw a police car parked in front of the town hall. It wouldn't be anything much. The police were always around, except for the fact that Sheriff Miller, an acquaintance of John's from years ago, called him over. "John Sterling." "It's been a while." John parked and got out of the truck, shaking the lawman's hand. Miller was about 50, with a belly bulging over his belt and a thick gray mustache. A good man overall, but a gossip like few others. "Sheriff, how are you?" "Oh, on the grind," Miller gave a few taps to his belly. "Heavier, older, but still working. And you? I heard you came back to the ranch. Going to stay this time?" "I haven't decided yet," John replied cautiously. "It's just that, look, I don't want to get involved where I'm not called, but there are some comments going around." Miller lowered his voice, although there was nobody around. "They say there's a woman and children living with you. Is that true?" John felt his muscles tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. "And if there are?" "Nothing. Nothing." Miller raised his hands. "Just curiosity of the town, you know how it is. But I have to ask, John, professionally speaking, does she have documents? Are the children enrolled in any school?" "She's a cousin of mine," John said, using the story he had prepared. "Lost her husband a few months ago. I offered shelter until she reorganizes. The children are small still, not at school age." It wasn't a complete lie. Isabel had lost her husband in a sense, and Leo really was too small for school. Miller studied John's face for a moment. "Right. And what is her name?" "Just for the record." "Why does it need a record?" John let a touch of irritation enter his voice. "I'm not committing any crime sheltering family, of course not," Miller backed off a bit. "It's just that, well, a notification arrived here at the station last week from Oklahoma City looking for a woman with 2 children. Isabel something. It says she kidnapped her own children and fled. There's even a photo, but it's a bit blurry." The world seemed to stop around John. His heart accelerated, but he forced himself to keep a calm expression, only curious. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because I thought it was strange, this notification arriving just when you appear with a woman and children. Coincidence, maybe, but I have to check these things, John. It's my job." John thought fast. Lying directly to the police could bring serious problems, but handing Isabel over was also not an option. "My cousin's name is Anna," he said finally. "Anna Paula Sterling. The children are John, Peter, and Maria. If you want to check, feel free. But you'll find she is exactly who I said she is." It wasn't true, of course, but John was betting that Miller wouldn't check very deeply, that the notification from the city was too generic, the photo too blurry, and that a respected rancher of the region saying the woman was a relative would be enough to end the matter. Miller observed him for another long moment before shrugging. "Okay, John, I trust you. But if by chance I discover you're hiding a fugitive or something like that, you'll have to answer for it. You know that, right?" "Of course," John said. "But there's nothing of the sort. Just a cousin needing help." They said goodbye, and John returned to the truck with his heart racing. This was a problem. A serious problem. If the police were actively looking for Isabel, it was a matter of time before the connection was made. Blurry photo or not, sooner or later, someone would make the link. He needed to tell Isabel. They needed to make a plan. When John arrived at the ranch, he found Isabel in the backyard, hanging washed clothes on the improvised clothesline she herself had made. The children were playing near the creek under her supervision. "We need to talk," John said without preamble. Isabel immediately read the seriousness in his face. She called the children, told them to go play near the house, and followed John to the porch. "What happened?" John told her about the conversation with Sheriff Miller. He saw the color drain from Isabel's face as he spoke. "He found us," she whispered. "Richard found us." "Not necessarily." John tried to calm her. "It could be standard procedure to distribute the notification through the towns of the region. It doesn't mean he knows exactly where you are. But he will find out." Isabel began to walk back and forth, her arms crossed tight against her body. "If the police are looking, it's a matter of time. We have to leave. Today, now." "And go where?" John stood up, placing himself in front of her. "You have no money, no documents, no plan. If you go running now, you'll be worse off than before." "But I can't stay. I can't put you in this situation. If they discover you lied to the police, let me worry about that." John caught her shoulders firmly. "Look at me, Isabel. Look." She stopped walking and looked at him, her eyes full of suppressed tears. "What exactly are you afraid of?" John asked. "Richard? The police?" "What?" "Everything," she admitted. "Everything. Of Richard finding me and taking the children. Of the police thinking I'm the criminal and not him. Of you getting tired of this situation and sending us away. Of waking up one day and discovering that this was all a dream and we're still in the barn going hungry." John let go of her shoulders and sighed. "I'm not going to send you away. And it wasn't a dream." He gestured to the house, to the clothes on the clothesline, to the children playing. "This is real, and we're going to protect this. But for that, you have to trust me." "I do trust you," Isabel said. "But—" "No more buts," John interrupted. "Trust or don't trust. If you trust, then let me resolve this. I have some contacts, people who can help." "What kind of contacts?" "A lawyer in Oklahoma City, Anthony Marshall. He was a friend of Claire's. Took care of the ranch's business. A good man, discreet. He might know ways to regularize your situation without involving authorities who will hand you over to Richard." Isabel wiped the tears and breathed deeply, trying to calm down. "You would do this even knowing it could bring trouble for you?" "I've been inviting trouble from the moment I decided not to hand you over to Sheriff Miller." John gave a small smile. "I'm not going back now." That night, after the children fell asleep, John called Anthony Marshall from his cell phone. The conversation was long and at some moments frustrating, but the lawyer agreed to investigate the situation discreetly. "I'll see what I can find out about this Richard," Anthony said. "If he has criminal records, registered debts, anything that could strengthen a custody case for the mother. But John, this could take time and could get expensive." "There's something I was thinking of selling," John said, looking around the ranch through the window. "I have some acres of land that I don't need. I can sell a piece to cover the costs." "Are you sure?" Anthony sounded surprised. "John, you barely know this woman." "I know enough," John said firmly. "I know enough to know she needs help, and I can provide it." Anthony sighed on the line. Okay, I'll see what I can do, but I'll need information. Her full name, date of birth, place of birth. Everything you can give me about Richard, too. John noted everything he needed and hung up. When he turned, he found Isabel standing in the living room door, obviously having heard the conversation. "You're going to sell land to help me?" she asked in disbelief. "It's just land," John said, "and land is not worth more than lives." Isabel crossed the room and, before John could react, hugged him. It was a tight, desperate hug, loaded with gratitude and emotion. John was paralyzed for a moment. It had been so long since someone had hugged him like that before awkwardly returning it, light taps on her back. "Thank you," Isabel murmured against his chest. "Thank you for believing in me when nobody else would." "It's going to be okay," John said, surprising himself by finding that he really believed it. "We're going to resolve this." But even as he said the comforting words, John couldn't ignore the feeling of growing restlessness, as if a storm was approaching on the horizon, as if the time of peace they had enjoyed was coming to an end. He was right. 2 days later, Will Carver appeared at the ranch. John was fixing the well pump when he saw Will's silver truck driving up the private road. His stomach tightened. Neighbors didn't make visits without a reason in the rural area. Will got out of the car wearing clothes too expensive for ranch work, dress pants, a button-down shirt, Italian leather boots. He took off his sunglasses and looked around with an evaluating expression. "John, what a surprise to find you here, working." Will approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I thought you were just going to resolve paperwork and leave." "Plans changed," John said shortly, wiping the grease off his hands on a rag. "So I saw." Will gestured to the house. "Place is almost habitable again. Doing all this to sell, or thinking of staying?" "I haven't decided yet." "Good. Good." Will walked around the property as if he were the owner. "I heard there are people living with you. Woman and children. Your cousin, they say." The way he said cousin made it clear he didn't believe it. "And what of it?" "Nothing. I just thought it was interesting, because I have friends in the city, and my friends told me a curious story about a woman who fled from there with 2 children. Isabel is her name. Would you happen to know her?" John felt fury growing in his chest, but he kept his voice controlled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Will smiled like a snake about to strike. "Because the description fits perfectly. Thin woman, black hair, 2 children, a girl of about 8 and a small boy. And look at the coincidence. That's exactly what you have here at your ranch." "Go straight to the point, Will. What do you want?" "I want Starlight Ranch," Will said without hesitation. "I've always wanted it. And now you have a problem. You have a woman wanted by the police living here. You lied to the authorities. That can bring you a lot of headache, John. Prison. Even, depending on how the thing is presented. Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering a solution." Will opened his arms. "Sell the ranch to me. I'll give a fair price. Not as high as the agribusiness people, but enough for you to start over in another place. In exchange, I forget everything I know about your cousin. And if I refuse, then I'll have to do my duty as a citizen." Will shrugged. "Inform the authorities about the fugitive you're hiding. Let them decide the rest." John took a step toward Will, his fists clenched. "Get off my property!" Now, Will took a step back, but the smile didn't leave his face. "Think about it, John. Are you really going to throw everything away for a woman you barely know? For children who aren't even yours?" He began to walk back to the truck. "I give you 3 days to decide. After that, I make that call." Will's truck kicked up dust as it left, leaving John standing there trembling with anger and concern. Isabel appeared on the porch, having obviously witnessed everything from inside the house. "He knows," she said, her voice small. "He knows who I am." John walked to the porch and climbed the steps slowly. "He suspects. He doesn't have certainty. But he will cause trouble if he doesn't get what he wants. Then give it to him, Isabel said immediately. Sell the ranch, take the money, and we'll leave. I can't let you lose everything because of me. No, John said with firmness. I'm not going to let a man like that blackmail me. And I'm not going to hand you and the children over. But what are we going to do? John looked at the land around him, at the house that was starting to feel like home again, at the children peering curiously through the window. We're going to fight, he said simply. We're going to fight. But even as he said it, John knew that the fight would be harder than anything he had ever faced, because this time he wasn't fighting just for land or property. He was fighting for something much more valuable. He was fighting for family. The 3 days of the deadline given by Will passed in growing tension. John contacted Anthony Marshall again, explaining the blackmail situation. The lawyer was direct. John, legally speaking, you're in a complicated position. If Will really reports that you're sheltering a fugitive, you'll have to answer for it. At best, obstruction of justice, and at worst, complicity in kidnapping if Richard convinces the authorities that Isabel kidnapped his children. John closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. Is there any way to resolve this? There is, but it needs to be fast and aggressive. Anthony spoke quickly. I got some information about this, Richard. He has a record. Drug possession 5 years ago. 2 assault charges that were dismissed, and here's the important one. A report at Child Protective Services in Oklahoma City 3 years ago. A neighbor reported screams and signs of domestic violence. It came to nothing because Isabel didn't confirm the report, but it's recorded. That helps a lot. With that, I can build a case that Isabel fled in legitimate defense of herself and the children, that it wasn't kidnapping, it was protection. But it will require Isabel to testify. She'll have to open a divorce and custody case, and it will draw attention a lot. How long does it take to protect her from kidnapping charges and guarantee provisional custody? If I go in with everything today, maybe 2 weeks to get a protective order. But John, this is going to cost, and it's going to expose everything. There's no way to do it discreetly. John looked through the living room window, seeing Isabel in the backyard teaching Lily how to plant seeds while Leo ran around chasing butterflies. A scene of domestic peace so normal, so precious, and so fragile. Do it, John said. Do everything that is necessary. Send the bill to me. John, we're talking about selling more than a piece of land. This is going to consume serious resources. I know. John ran his hand through his hair. But I can't let her be taken back to that situation. I can't, Anthony. Not after everything. There was a pause on the line, then Anthony said softly, You care about her, don't you? It's not just about doing what's right. John didn't answer immediately. He didn't know the answer himself. When did he start seeing Isabel as more than a desperate woman needing help? When did the children become more than a temporary responsibility? When did that empty ranch start to feel like home again? Just do what you have to do, he said finally, dodging the question. After hanging up, John sat in the darkness of the living room for a long time. He knew he had crossed a line. It was no longer about providing temporary shelter. It was about taking total responsibility for the safety of that family. And for the first time since Claire died, John Sterling felt truly alive. Frightened, yes. Worried, certainly. But alive. With purpose. With something worth fighting for. He heard light footsteps on the stairs and saw Isabel coming down, wrapped in an old blanket. Can't sleep? John asked. How could I? She sat on the sofa beside him. They're going to destroy you, John. They're going to drag you down with me. Let them try. You don't understand. Isabel turned to him, her eyes shining in the darkness. Richard's family. They have connections. Dangerous people. They aren't going to just give up. Neither am I, John said simply. Isabel studied him in the gloom. Why are you like this? So good, even when you shouldn't be. I'm not good, John shook his head. I'm just an old man trying to do something right before I die, trying to honor the memory of the woman I loved, being the type of person she always wanted me to be. She must have been incredible. She was. John smiled in the darkness. And she would have loved you, would have loved the children. She always wanted a house full of people, of noise, of life. I gave her a ranch that was too silent and too solitary. It's not silent anymore, Isabel pointed out softly. No, John agreed. It's not anymore. They sat side by side in the dark, saying nothing, just existing in the same space. And John realized that at some point in the last few weeks, Isabel had become more than a responsibility. She had become important, dangerously important. The following morning brought rapid action. Anthony Marshall worked fast, entering all the necessary documents in the Red Creek courthouse. By midday, a protective order was granted, preventing Richard, his family, or anyone acting on their behalf from approaching Isabel or the children. But as Anthony had warned, this made everything public. In a small town like Red Creek, legal processes were a matter of conversation. By the end of the day, practically everyone knew that John Sterling was sheltering a woman fleeing an abusive husband, that he had lied to the authorities about their relationship, and that he was spending significant money on lawsuits. The reactions were mixed. Some, especially the older women who remembered Claire and her kindness, supported John Mrs. Gable, the closest neighbor to the ranch, appeared with a basket of homemade bread and hugged Isabel on the porch, saying that any woman fleeing violence deserved protection. Others were less kind. They called John a fool, saying he was being manipulated by a pretty woman. They speculated about the nature of the relationship between them. Cruel gossip spread about Isabel being an opportunist, about the children not really being hers, about John having a nervous breakdown. And Will Carver didn't waste time in capitalizing on the situation. 2 days after the protective order was granted, he appeared again at the ranch. This time he wasn't alone. He brought a man in a suit carrying a leather briefcase. John greeted Will with false cordiality. "This is Mr. Henry Matos, my lawyer," Will announced. "We came to make a final proposal." John crossed his arms, blocking the entrance to the porch. "I have no interest in your proposals. You'll want to hear this one," Will smiled, "because we discovered something interesting. Your tax situation with the property is complicated. It seems there are back taxes, very far back. And with interest and accumulated penalties, you owe a significant amount to the county." John felt his stomach tighten. He knew about the back taxes. During the years in Oklahoma City, he had simply stopped paying, seeing no point in maintaining a property he planned to sell. But he had never calculated how much he really owed. "And," he said, trying not to show concern, Mr. Henry Matos opened the briefcase and pulled out documents. "According to our calculations, you owe approximately $300,000 in taxes, interest, and penalties. If you don't pay in 30 days, the county can initiate the foreclosure process on the property." "That's absurd," John protested, although he wasn't sure if it was. "It can't be that much. 4 years of property tax, plus penalties of 40% per year, plus compound interest," Mr. Henry listed clinically. "It easily reaches that value. My client, Mr. Prest Carver, is willing to do the following. He buys the property for a value that covers the debts, and still leaves a reasonable extra for you to start over. $350,000. You pay the taxes and keep $50,000 clear, or?" John asked, knowing there was an or. "The county forecloses. You lose everything without receiving anything, and your credit is ruined." Will shrugged. "Your choice." John looked at the two men, feeling anger grow. "You set this up. You went to the county and gathered all the debts, Increase them with creative interpretations of the law. You created an inflated debt to force me to sell. We didn't create anything, Mr. Henry said calmly. We just checked the real situation of the property. What you choose to do with that information is your problem. Will approached, lowering his voice so only John could hear. Accept the proposal, John. It will give you enough money to start over, to help your friend and the children, to do the right thing for everyone involved. Refusing, you lose everything, the ranch, the money, and probably even the woman, when she realizes you can no longer support her. Get off my property, John said low. Now, you have 24 hours to decide. Will left a card on the porch. After that, I go to the county and start the official collection process. And then it'll be too late to negotiate. They left, leaving John holding the card, trembling with anger and fear. Isabel came out from inside the house where she had listened to everything. Is it true? You owe all that? Probably yes, John admitted. I stopped paying when I went away. I didn't think about the consequences. And do you have the means to pay? John did the math in his head. With the sale of the piece of land he had already planned to sell, plus savings, he could gather maybe $200,000. Not enough for the $300,000 he supposedly owed. No, he said finally. I don't. Isabel covered her mouth with her hand. Then you're going to lose the ranch because of me, because you spent money defending me instead of paying the taxes. It's not your fault, John said firmly. The choices were mine, but the consequences are yours too. Isabel began to walk back and forth. John, you have to accept Will's offer. Sell to him. Take the money. Save what you can. And where will you go? We'll find a way. We always have. Now there's a protective order. The divorce process is underway. We'll go somewhere else, start over. But you can't lose everything for us. I'm not going to sell to him, John said stubbornly. I'm not going to let that man take advantage of the situation. Then what are you going to do? John had no answer. He stood there looking at the land that had been in his family for 3 generations, feeling the weight of all his choices. It was Lily who broke the impasse. She came running from the house holding something in her hands, a drawing made on crumpled paper. Uncle John! Uncle John! Look what I did! John knelt to see the drawing. It was a house, clearly the ranch, with stick figures representing people. A large one with a beard, John, presumably a medium one, Isabel, and 2 small ones, the children. All smiling. All together. It's our family, Lily explained proudly. You, Mommy, me, and Leo. I was going to ask the teacher to see, but I'm not in school yet, but when I go, I'm going to show her. John looked at the drawing, at Lily's hopeful face, and felt something break inside him. It wasn't defeat. It was clarity. Isa, he said, still looking at the drawing, do you love this ranch? The question caught Isabel by surprise. What? The ranch? Do you like being here? Planting in the garden, taking care of the house, seeing the children play in the yard? Yes, Isabel admitted, more than anywhere I've ever been. Here, I feel safe, in peace. And the children, are they happy here? Happier than I've seen them in years. John stood up, the drawing still in his hand, and looked at the house, the land, everything it represented. Then, I'm not going to sell, he said finally. I'm not going to sell to Will. I'm not going to sell to the agribusiness people. I'm not going to sell to anyone. But the taxes. I'll find a way with the taxes. John was already formulating a plan. I'll go to the county. I'll negotiate an installment plan. I'll sell what I need to sell to cover the debt, but keeping the main house and surrounding terrain. If necessary, I'll take a loan. But I'm not going to let Will win, John. And there's more. He looked directly at Isabel. I want you and the children to stay. Not temporarily. Permanently. Make this ranch your home for real. Isabel was speechless. her eyes filling with tears. "You don't know what you're saying. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure." "I know exactly what I'm saying." John held her shoulders. "I'm saying that this house has been empty for too long, that I was dead for too long, and that you three brought life back here. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to go back to being the solitary man I was. But, and the people? What are they going to say?" "Let 'em talk," John shrugged. "They're always going to talk anyway. At least, let them talk about something that's worth it." Isabel let out a sound between a laugh and a sob, wiping away the tears. "You're crazy." "Probably," John agreed. "But it's the best thing I've done in 5 years. Leo came running from inside the house, following his sister. "Mommy! Mommy! I'm hungry!" Isabel picked up her son in her arms, laughing through the tears. "Let's make lunch then. Let's make a big lunch to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Lily asked. Isabel looked at John, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded. "Celebrate that you're going to stay," Isabel said. "Forever. This is our home now." The following weeks were of intense work. John went to the county seat and, with Anthony Marshall's help, negotiated the payment of the back taxes. It wasn't $300,000, as Will had claimed. It was half that, and with a 5-year payment plan, it became manageable. He sold part of the non-essential land, keeping the main house and about 50 hectares around it. With the money, he paid part of the debt and invested in necessary renovations. Isabel's divorce process advanced. Richard tried to contest it, but with the history of violence and the witnesses, including the neighbor who had made the report years ago, the judge granted Isabel provisional custody. Richard was ordered to pay child support and forbidden from approaching. Richard's family tried more intimidation, but the constant presence of Sheriff Miller, who, after checking the whole situation, took John and Isabel's side, discouraged more serious attempts. Will Carver was furious with the failure of his plans, but there was nothing legal he could do. John kept the property, kept the family, and kept his dignity. Life on the ranch established a new rhythm. Isabel enrolled Lily in the town school. Leo made friends with neighbors' children. The garden grew, producing vegetables and greens that Isabel sold at the Saturday market, generating a small but useful income. John hired some part-time workers and started reactivating parts of the ranch. It wouldn't return to being the large operation it was in the past, but it would be sustainable. It would be enough. And at some point, without anyone formally announcing it, John, Isabel, Leo, and Lily became a family not on paper, at least not yet, but in all the ways that mattered. They ate together, worked together, laughed together. The house that had been silent for so long was full of life again. One night, 6 months after that first meeting in the barn, John was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Isabel joined him. The children were sleeping upstairs, exhausted from a day playing in the creek. "I was thinking," Isabel said, sitting beside him, "about this arrangement of ours." John felt a tightening in his chest, fearing what she would say next. And I think it needs a name." She looked at him. "People in town still don't quite know what to do with me. I'm your cousin, your tenant, your employee. I'm something they can't categorize. It bothers them." "Does it bother you?" "A little," she admitted. "Not for me, but for the children." Lily comes home from school saying that other students ask why she doesn't have the same last name as me, why her address is Mr. Sterling's Ranch, why, well, many things. John was silent for a moment. "And what do you want to do about that?" Isabel took a deep breath. I want. I think I want us to be family for real. Not just in practice, but on paper, too. You're saying? I'm saying that when Richard's divorce comes through, and if you want, I'd like to consider." She was clearly nervous, the words coming out in a rush. "Marriage. With you. If you want. It doesn't have to be now. It can wait." But John took her hand, interrupting the nervous flow of words. "Claire always said that God works in mysterious ways," he said softly. "I didn't believe it much when she died. I thought I had been abandoned along with her, but now I see the path. I see how I needed to come back here, how you needed to be in the barn, how everything fit in an impossible way to plan. And I would love to make you my official family," John said, smiling. "I would love to give the children a permanent home, a stable last name, a life that doesn't involve fleeing or hiding. I would love to give you real security, real partnership." "Are you sure?" Isabel squeezed his hand. "Because once we do this, there's no turning back. You'll be tied to me, to the children, to the whole messy package we are." "Isa," John said, using the nickname for the first time. "I'm already tied. I have been since the moment I decided not to send you away from the barn. The marriage will just make official what my heart already decided." Isabel smiled through the tears and leaned in to kiss him. It was a soft kiss, sweet, full of promise and hope. When they separated, John looked at the stars starting to appear in the sky and felt, for the first time since Claire's death, that he was where he should be, doing what he should be doing, being who he should be. 1 year later, Starlight Ranch was unrecognizable compared to the abandoned place John had found 18 months before. The house was painted fresh white, the blue shutters restored. Isabel's garden had expanded, now occupying a full hectare, providing greens for the market and for regional restaurants. John had formed a partnership with smaller neighbors, offering his land for collective crops in a cooperative system. It wasn't as profitable as the traditional ranch, but it was sustainable and created community. The children had grown. Lily was about to turn 10, a smart and confident girl, very different from the frightened child in the barn. Leo was 5 and would start school the next year. And Isabel was Isabel Sterling now. They had married in a small ceremony in the town church, with Lily and Leo as flower girl and ring bearer, and half the town as witnesses. Her dress was simple, bought at the department store in Red Creek, but in John's eyes, she had never been more beautiful. Richard's divorce had finally come through after many legal back and forths. He had the right to supervised visits, but he never exercised them. It was as if he had simply given up, found another life, or realized he didn't really have an interest in the children beyond seeing them as property. Will Carver still lived on the neighboring ranch, still looked with envy at John's lands, but had given up on direct attempts to take the property. A cold but stable truce existed between them. On the morning of Lily's birthday, the house was full of activity. Isabel prepared a cake in the kitchen while Leo helped, mainly by eating the batter. John was on the porch, organizing tables and chairs for the small party they would have in the afternoon. Lily ran out holding an envelope. "Uncle John. I mean, Daddy." She still got confused sometimes, switching between the titles. A letter arrived from Aunt Claire. John was confused for a moment before understanding. She meant a letter from the cemetery. They visited Claire's grave regularly, and John had taught Lily about his first wife, about what she was like and how she would have loved to meet the children. "It's not from the cemetery, silly," John said, taking the envelope. "It's a normal letter." But when he looked at the sender, he froze. It was from Anthony Marshall, but the envelope contained official documents. He opened it with fingers trembling slightly. They were adoption papers for Leo and Lily. John showed the papers, unable to speak. Isabel read quickly and covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "John, you did this? I thought." His voice came out raspy. "I thought it was time to make it official. To be their father for real. Not just in the heart." Lily looked confused between the two adults. "What's happening?" Isabel knelt and hugged her daughter. "Uncle John, Daddy John is going to be your father officially. On paper. For real. But he's already my father, Lily said, still confused. Yes, love, Isabel said, laughing through the tears. Yes, he already is. But now everyone will know. The paper will say it. Leo came out of the kitchen, his mouth dirty with cake batter. I'm going to have a daddy on paper too? John picked the boy up in his arms. You too, champ. Both of you are going to be Sterlings officially. Leo shrugged, more interested in going back to the kitchen and the cake batter, but Lily hugged John with a strength that almost knocked him over. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. The true measure of a man is not found in the lands he owns, the wealth he accumulates, or the strength of his hands when they are clenched in anger, but rather in the softness of those same hands when they reach out to lift someone who has fallen. Life, in its vast and often painful complexity, rarely offers us a straight path. It is a winding road of losses that leave us hollowed, and trials that test the very fabric of our character. For many, the weight of grief becomes a fortress, a high wall built to keep the world out, protecting a heart that no longer wishes to feel the sting of disappointment. Yet, as the seasons turn and the parched earth eventually welcomes the rain, we are reminded that our purpose is not found in the safety of our solitude, but in the courage of our connections. To look upon a stranger in need and see not a burden, but a reflection of our own humanity, is perhaps the highest calling an adult can answer. It is a profound realization that comes with age, that we do not truly lose what we give away. We only lose what we refuse to share. When we open our doors to those who have no home, when we offer bread to those who are hungry, and when we provide a name to those who have been forgotten, we are not just changing their lives, we are reclaiming our own. We learn that family is not solely a matter of blood and biology, but a masterpiece of choice and commitment, painted with the colors of sacrifice and the strokes of daily devotion. A house remains just a structure of wood and stone until it is filled with the echoes of children's laughter and the quiet rhythm of shared labor. In the end, when the sun sets on our long journey, the stories that will matter are not the ones where we stood alone in our pride, but the ones where we dared to be vulnerable, where we dared to believe that a broken barn could become a sanctuary and a weary stranger could become a daughter. For in the simple act of choosing to care, we find the only legacy that truly endures, the knowledge that we left the world a little warmer, a little kinder, and far more full of life than we found it.